Welcome back to this week's ARTFX Tutorial Tuesday, in which I teach you how to make electronic music with Ableton Live. You might have noticed the official Loopmasters discount code at the start of this video. Use it to get a nice 10% discount on all Loopmasters products. Also, I highly recommend watching this video in 1080p, so you get a clear view of what I'm doing. Last week I showed you everything about vocal chopping like the pros, but this week's video is a little different. Today I want to talk to you about song structure. So that means deciding the main structure of the track in terms of length, drops, intro, etc. Adding locators to the track and putting all elements of the track on the right place. So, let's fire up this Ableton project and see what we've got so far. Now, let's start with a little talk about what I want to do with this track. First of all, there's going to be a fairly big intro in terms of sound. But I want to be able to build up to that and that way create the climax for the drop. I do this by making a fairly long intro which builds up towards a small break and then builds up into the main first drop. After the drop we have a breakdown leading into the build up again, which then builds up into the second drop. After the second drop we end the track with a small outro. So what about it? The main rule about 128 BPM is that every minute has precisely 32 bars, which is good since it's dividable by 4. So in house music we always work with measures in groups of 4. 4 beats is 1 bar, and have a change in your track every 8 or 16 bars to prevent it from being repetitive, and so on. Everything is dividable by 4. So with our fact that every minute has 32 bars, that means that it fits perfectly in our 4 measure schedule, since 32 is also dividable by 4. So what I have decided for this track structure, I want the track to be 7 minutes long, which means 7 times 32 bars is 224 bars in total length. I want the first drop to hit at the 3-minute mark. And I'm not going to make this 32 bars long, but I'll go with 24 bars, which is still dividable by 4 if you understood my previous information. This also means that the drops are kinda short, but that is because the break between the first and second drop is also pretty much a drop on its own, but more a melodic drop. Then the second drop is again 24 bars long and it will hit at 5 minutes and 15 seconds. So the first thing I can do is stretch this sidechain trigger all the way to the 7 minutes mark, since my track is going to be 7 minutes long. Now let's make our loop markers a length of 16 bars, which is just a nice ruler for you to work with. Let's set this 16 bar loop to the start of a track and make sure that the song marker, which marks the point where playback starts, is set at the start of a track. Now you can add a locator like this. You go to Create, Add Locator, which creates a label in which you can type some text. I call this locator Intro Drums. This part of the intro will be 32 bars long, which is twice the size of a loop. So let's put the loop marker at bar 33 and add another locator. This is where the vocals will kick in, so let's call it intro vocal. This part will again be 32 bars long, so let's put the loop marker at bar 65. Here we create a loop marker called build up. The build up will be 16 bars long and end at the 3-minute mark. Oh, wait, let's move the build up to bar 81 so it ends on the 3-minute mark, and let's add another locator at bar 65, which indicates the start of our little 16 bar break before the build up. I call this break synth, since I want to do some more synth stuff here without any drums. Now, we can also see that our first drop starts at bar 97, so I add a locator called drop 1. Now, if you remembered, the drops will be 24 bars long instead of 32 to change things up a little. So make the loop marker 24 bars long instead of 16. Also, the drops will be quite busy with changes every 8 bars to make it less repetitive. So, now at bar 121, we make a locator called drop 1 break, which indicates the moment where our first drop containing the main bass lines ends and leads into the drop which is more melodic. So this part of the drop is going to be 32 bars long again. I now add a locator at bar 153 called build up 2. Let's change the name of the first build-up from build-up to build-up 1. Next we make our loop marker 24 bars long again and drag it to the end of build-up 2, which is 16 bars long. I add a locator called drop 2 to bar 169, and then we can clearly see that our outro starts at bar 193. Finally, our outro will be 32 bars long again and end at the 7-minute mark. So let's add the locator called outro to bar 193. Last, I want to add one more locator to the intro, since I want the synth intro to start at after 16 bars of the drums intro. So I add a locator to the start of bar 17 and call it intro synth. Now we can start placing all the elements that we made so far on the right position in the track. This is probably going to be changed and shuffled up a bit later on, but it gives a rough indication how a track is going to look. First, open up the drums group and stretch the kick and snare MIDI clips all the way to the right side of the track at the 7 minutes mark. You can do this by selecting them and then click and dragging the right side of the MIDI clip. So when the vocal intro starts, I don't want any drums to play, so I can delete them from the first 16 bars of the vocal intro. Then I want the kick drum to start after 16 bars of the vocal intro, to make sure that something changes every 16 bars. So we can drag the left side of the snare drum to the right to make it start at the beginning of the break, and then we can simply delete both the kick and snare from the first break. During the first build-up, I only want the kick drum to play, so drag the snare drum to the right and make it start at the beginning of the first drop. During the drops, both the kick and snare are used, so we can leave it at this point. In the break, between the two drops, I don't want the kick and snare to play, so let's select that area and delete the clips by pressing delete on your keyboard. Then both kick and snare played throughout the second drop and also the first 16 bar of the outro. And lastly, the kick drum plays only the last 16 bar. Now we close the drums group and open up the percussion group. First, let's solo this group and have a listen to it. Okay, let's turn the synths and vocals off and see how the main drums and percussion sound together. Okay, so I think that I want the hats to start together with the main drums, so let's drag these out to the full length of the track. But first I need to make sure that the loop function is turned on. I do this by clicking on the audio or MIDI clip and activating this little loop button. Now I can stretch this out to the full length of the track. Okay, so during the vocal intro I don't want any percussion to be heard, so I can select and delete the clips from that part of the arrangement. Also, I want the main percussion to start during the first build-up, so let's drag them to that locator. And I want the white noise to start at the first drop. Then I want no percussion during the break between the drops and have the main percussion start at the second build-up. The white noise kicks in at the second drop again and goes on together with the other percussion until the end of the track. So we can now open up the synths group and see where to place these. And I always like to listen to the elements before doing the arranging. First we extend them all the way to the end of the arrangement, and I wanted the synths to begin at bar 17 with the pads and at bar 49 with the arpeggio. Now we delete the synths from a drop since we don't need them there by selecting the area and pressing delete on your keyboard. So I want the arpeggio to start again at the second part of the break between the drops, just to give that break a little bit of dynamics. And lastly, I don't want the arpeggio in the outro, so I delete it from there. Now the last thing to do is the vocal track. So first check if loop is turned on, and now let's stretch this out a little and then move the MIDI clip to bar 33, since this is where our vocal intro starts. Now I copy this clip to the second break by Control, click and dragging it to the second break. Notice that I made a subtle change in the timing of the vocal. The first vocal part ends at the start of the first build-up, while the second vocal part still plays during the build-up. I do this to introduce a little bit of variety in my track and prevent it from getting repetitive. I hope you enjoyed this week's video, and if so, I would like to see you back next week with ARTFX Tutorial Tuesday.